Hey, it's Dustin, and welcome to another episode of Horroritis.
They're here.
So, the Poltergeist remake has been out for about a month now, and I've gotten some mixed reviews from various people. I haven't seen it myself, but that's mainly because I can't justify dropping like half a week's pay to take the family to a movie. So, if I actually do go see it in the theater, it'll have to be when it hits the second run theater. I have been asking questions though, and one of those questions is, how does it stack up to the original? Surprisingly, the answer I usually got is, oh, I haven't seen the original. And really the only way that I could deal with that is to cut their head off and chuck it at a Redbox machine, because it just seemed like the thing to do, right? Another question I've been asking is, how much CGI did they use? And from what I've heard, it's got a fair bit. But that's not even odd. I mean, it's not even bad. CGI is the go-to tool for filmmakers now. It's just the way that movies have evolved. But it wasn't that long ago that filmmakers and effects crews had to rely on practical effects like foam rubber, sticky blood, and a lot of times real fire. The original Poltergeist is one of those movies, so let's go ahead and jump right in. The movie starts with the Freeling family. Steve, Diane, Dana, Robbie, and Carol Ann are all sleeping, and their dog is running around eating various things that the kids have left out for it to eat. And it wakes up Carol Ann, which is the youngest daughter. By the way, cutest kid in horror movie history. I'm fairly sure of that. You could probably look it up. It might be true. I don't know. Maybe not. Anyway, she wakes up and goes downstairs to where her dad is sleeping in the chair, and in front of him is the TV, and the channel is all staticky because in the 80s, after a certain point at night, they stopped showing programming and the channel just went to static. That's the way they did it. So the TV is static, and she gets real close and she starts having a conversation with the TV, or a voice inside the TV, but we don't hear that. All we hear is her side of the conversation. And eventually, she starts getting louder and louder, trying to talk to whatever she's hearing through the TV.
Talk loud, I can't hear you.
And eventually it's loud enough that it wakes up everybody else in the house, and they all come down to see what's going on. So cut to the next day, everything's back to normal. Carol Ann's pet bird dies, but she ends up with a couple goldfish, so that's alright. We also get a shot of an ominous looking tree, which we just kind of know is going to come into play later. That's called foreshadowing. And then later that night we get a scene that establishes the adults as like the cool parents who smoke pot and pretend to be on the dive team.
Dive off is like free falling, okay?
So later that night, everybody's asleep, and once again Carol Ann wakes up and tries to have a conversation with the TV. It's at this point that a beam of energy shoots out of the TV, hits the wall, shakes the whole house, causes like a localized earthquake that only affects their property and only they can feel it. And that's when everybody wakes up and Carol Ann says that ever so copied iconic phrase.
They're here.
So the next morning the family begins to experience ghostly shenanigans. Glass breaks inexplicably, silverware seems to bend by itself, and furniture rearranges itself. At first, Diane's kind of freaked out, but then she thinks it's great, and by the time Steve gets home, she's got the floor all marked out to where if you set something in one spot, it'll slide across the room to the other spot. And she tries it with a chair at first and lets Steve look. Then, she puts a helmet on Carol Ann, has Carol Ann sit there, and Carol Ann goes sweeping across the kitchen. And it's at that point that Steve decides nobody can go into the kitchen until he gets this figured out. Now later that night, there's a big thunderstorm, and that tree that we talked about earlier comes to life and crashes through the bedroom window and snatches up Robbie and takes him back out. Now, the family obviously freaks out and goes chasing after him outside, leaving Carol Ann in the bedroom. So, by the time they get out to the tree is actually opened up and trying to swallow the boy. So while the family's distracted trying to save Robbie, Carol Ann's closet opens up and sucks her into a different dimension. Once Robbie's rescued, they realize they have no idea where Carol Ann is, so they start searching the entire house, including the pit that's one day supposed to be a swimming pool, but now it's just filled with rainwater and it's all muddy and gross. So Robbie makes it up to his parents' room, and that's where he hears Carol Ann's voice coming out of the TV. And that's where things get good. That sums up roughly about the first 40 minutes of the movie. So now let's talk about why this movie's awesome. For me, it's the effects. I mean, this movie is over 30 years old, and you can still watch it and say, hell yeah, when you see an awesome effect. And there's plenty of awesome effects in this movie. Of course, some of the effects are going to look a little dated, but that's because this movie came out in 1982. And in 82, these effects were kick-ass. So let's start with the first big effect of the movie, and that's where the tree breaks in and snatches Robbie out of the window. Not only did they have to make a tree come to life, bust through a window, and snatch up a little boy, they had to moments later make that tree try to eat that boy. Then there's the steak on the counter, which is amazingly cool for really just being a complete physical, practical effect. I mean, there wasn't any computers used there. It wasn't like stop motion or anything like that. It was completely physical, and it was great. And then, following that, you get the face rip. Which, okay, it looks dated, but once again, it's over 30 years old. And even for being over 30 years old, it's still kind of cool to watch, right? Then there's the portal to a different dimension that was actually created with a combination of strobe lights, spotlights, and various other lights all shined through a fish tank to get that kind of living light effect. And I thought that was really awesome. Then, of course, there's that killer clown doll that tries to choke out Robbie under the bed. And then Diane gets drug around the room vertically. They actually had to build that room on a soundstage and then rotate the whole thing in order to get that effect. So that was pretty cool. Then there's the Portal to Hell, and they also had to build that from scratch, and that looks amazing as well. And you have that big white monster in the hallway. And there's the corpses that start pushing their way up through the ground. Those were actually real skeletons because it was cheaper to use real skeletons over fake ones for whatever reason. It's at that point that Steve realizes that the real estate company / construction company that he works for built the entire town over a cemetery and didn't move the bodies.
You son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you?
And by the way, does his boss look familiar to you? Yeah, it does. Just tying the whole thing up, ain't I? The whole thing wraps up with probably the coolest effect in the whole movie, and that's the house imploding at the end. And they actually had to build a small-scale house from scratch to make that effect work. With Tobe Hooper directing this, and Steven Spielberg kind of like partnering up with him, and this was like at the same time as E.T. was being made, I think. I mean, this movie had amazing effects, especially for its time, and really, it had two really good people making sure that it went off right, and I think they succeeded extremely well. Aside from the effects, another cool thing about this movie is how often it's referenced in other movies or TV shows. It's been referenced in The Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors 1, 5, 6, and 23, Ace Ventura, South Park, Supernatural, Family Guy, Psych, Warehouse 13, Holliston, Being Human, and like so many more where they're just constantly quoting. They're always doing Carol Ann's quote.
They're here.
They're always quoting Zelda Rubinstein.
This house is clean.
I mean, The Simpsons practically recreated it in one of their episodes where They move into a house, the house is haunted, crazy stuff happens, then bodies come up out of the ground, and Homer even goes as far as to call up the realtor and yell about not moving the bodies. Then of course at the end the house implodes. And there's no way that I could make a video about Poltergeist and not mention the curse. That's right, there have been a number of deaths surrounding the Poltergeist movies. Dominic Dunn, the girl that played the older sister Dana, shortly before the movie was released, she was actually choked into brain death and put in a coma by her boyfriend, and a couple days later she died. Heather O'Rourke, the girl that played Carol Ann, actually died just after they wrapped up filming on the third movie. She died from septic shock, and she was being treated for Crohn's disease, I believe. Zelda Rubinstein died in 2010, albeit of natural causes. There were 2 more deaths, but those guys haven't appeared in the first one, so I'll save them for when I hit the second or third Poltergeist movie. So that's it for Poltergeist. It's a great movie, great effects. It's rewatchable for sure. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. If you have seen it, why not watch it again? Because it's a good movie, right? So thanks for watching Horroritis. Next week we'll have another video, and this next one will probably be more obscure, something you might not have seen yet. Also, starting in July, we'll be doing more foreign stuff. I plan on, in the next 12 months, hitting one region of the world and just grabbing maybe the 5 or 10 really good horror movies from that region that you should really check out. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you want to see more of them, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at @TheHorroritis. And if there's anything that you would like me to see or review, let me know, and if it's not already on my list, I'll add it. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, put some ice on that horror. It really looks inflamed.